Welcome to another XYZ Storytellers podcast episode, quarantine edition. The other day I was scrolling through Facebook and I came across this article where it talked about how important it is to document where we are now and where we will be for historians to look back on this global pandemic with intrigue. Now, with the Spanish flu, it might have been a little bit different considering that there wasn't as much digital content to siphon through. So I'm curious to see what historians take away from this day and age in 2020. But I figured I'd bring up the question of what are things looking like right now and where do we think things are going to look in the near to distant future concerning our societal behaviors or our government interaction in our daily lives.
Hey everyone, welcome to XYZ Storytellers, a platform started by three people across generations X, Y, and Z engaging in conversations in the spirit of increased empathy and understanding.
Hi, I'm Erin, the millennial traveler and author. I'm an empath with a drive for connecting to others. I enjoy singing in the car, eating pints of ice cream, and hanging out with my cat Gimbal.
Hey, I'm Rich, the gray-beard Gen Xer with 30 years in conference rooms or airplanes around the globe. I've also been a Little League coach and a family bus driver. This podcast is a way for me to have the types of conversations that just don't happen enough in my day-to-day life.
And me, I'm Lily. I've always been very opinionated and I speak passionately about things no matter who I might be with at the time. I'm here to share my thoughts and get the perspectives of two other generations so I can grow and expand my understanding of the world around me.
With XYZ Storytellers, our conversations aren't meant to be political, social, or even related to current events. We are just recording authentic conversations on a variety of topics, hoping they will resonate in some small way. Thanks for listening.
So I thought I'd open that up to just kind of ask you what you think might continue after all of this is over. For instance, I have a feeling that there's a chance that senior shopping hours will remain. They've been having this extra hour before, and our states have probably handled a couple things differently. In Ohio, we have senior shopping hours where elderly, I think it's 55 and up, can go to the grocery store an hour before the general public so that they have time to get what they need and not have to put themselves at risk, at a further risk than the younger populations. So that's something that I could easily see continuing, as well as, you know, the plexiglass in front of cashiers, things like that. So I thought it might be kind of cool to talk about what we're seeing now and what we think might remain later.
Sure. I mean, I'm only 9 months away from that senior shopping hours. Good for me. I think the whole virtual aspect of working is going to be taken to the next level. I think for the longest time we've had the ability to do the virtual work in my job, but the personal touch or being in the same room has always been something that was important. I mean, I've done days where I've gotten up, flown in for a meeting, spent 2 hours in a room, probably spoke for all of 10 minutes during that 2-hour meeting and then flown back. And it was considered a successful meeting because the client got to meet the team or get a sense for our commitment or whatever. And I think that, those kinds of trips, they either aren't going to make sense. Either the client's not necessarily going to take people in from other parts of the country, or me as a consultant, I'm not willing to sacrifice an entire day for a 2-hour meeting, right? So the idea of, and that's got nothing to do with contagion. That just has to do with how much of my life was spent in planes and in airports. And I think local travel, people won't be flying places for vacations. There'll be a lot more regional vacation taking, I think, by people going to, places just down the road. Because the whole adage of something is better than nothing. And that was an interesting thing that's happened over the last 30 years. I mean, it wasn't until the last 10 years where the idea of everybody flew for a week vacation to some long, faraway place became the norm. For the longest time, it was, you did something local. Maybe you drove a few hours to some place. So I think that how far and people are needing to go, the idea of keeping up with the Joneses and having a better vacation. I mean, I think that, and the cruise industry is going to take a hit, right? So those are my initial thoughts around how things are going to be different. I think I won't call it a new normal, but I think we will still, we won't go back to an old thing. I think there'll be a new equilibrium in a lot of places. I don't know how you're feeling about school and college. I mean, there's some talk about how college in general, not specific colleges, but how college in general is going to be viewed now, given what's happened.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that because the governor of Texas, he just closed all the schools in Texas for the rest of the school year. So we're doing online school until the last day. And some people think that it's going to extend into next school year, where we start out the school year online, and then when they think it's safe to go back, we'll start going back into classrooms. I just think overall people are just going to be a lot more like wary of like big groups, not because they think everyone has like the coronavirus, but just because you realize, like, seeing all these like scientific like videos like on my feed, like where they explain how far like a sneeze or like a cough or just breathing can like carry across a room. Like, I think people are just going to be a lot more wary of like who they're around and how they're like handling certain situations with washing your hands and just like not being surrounded by people. So I don't know. I think I can't predict how people are going to act, but I just think people are going to pay more attention to certain things.
Well, I think, Rich, it's interesting that you mentioned going to more local places, because I feel like part of that is going to be affected by the fact that people are starting to notice what's in their hometown a little bit more. I mean, there are running trails that I didn't know existed until I was looking for somewhere else to go that was local and not, too far of a distance, because we aren't supposed to be traveling much. And so I think people are going to be doing more local things simply because they now know what's out there. And not everything is open, so they can't take advantage of it right now. But I think it'll be interesting to see how tourism is impacted locally. I have a feeling more people are going to be going to local establishments. But Lily, you're absolutely right. I mean, just being in the grocery store and being in the same aisle as someone right now is kind of nerve-wracking for me, because you can't possibly be 6 feet apart unless you're both kind of up against the aisles, like inching along. So you're absolutely right. There's already that sense of, I don't want to be too close to somebody. I don't want to invade their personal space.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a shift in overall appreciation for, I think we've all started to learn what are essential services, and there's some people that are doing some things like there's construction guys working on, the $1 million home in the neighborhood. So because the owner has the money to pay a premium and they need to get their $1 million home built. I mean, I'm not going to say that's an essential service. As a matter of fact, I think it's a sign of privilege that, and again, I don't have any problem with it. And I'm glad those guys get to make the money that they're making from a labor perspective. But the essential service of, okay, the grocery worker. I mean, I'm going to be, thank people left and right. Once it settles down and I feel I can go in and actually just say something to somebody, the nurses, I'll be thanking nurses and people for forever. So I think the idea of what's an important service, I think I read an article that talked about how the influencing economy is going to take a big hit. The idea that people make a bunch of money because they get a bunch of views on Instagram, while other people, are losing their jobs or are providing more valuable services. So I think the idea of, like Billy said to me just the other night, something that she, just last night, that she's never said before. She said, okay, well, first off, in true quarantine fashion, she forgot what day it was. She thought it was Friday and it was Saturday. I mean, it was Thursday. But she said, all right, so where are we going to go for dinner tonight? We're going to try and help keep a business, a local restaurant in business by, doing takeout. And then, so the idea of, okay, what's the, who can I support from a local business perspective? And there's always been this Project Main Street, support local, farm to market. I think there's going to be a movement of people looking at that. And the other side of it is going to be, there's big businesses that I know I talk to all the time in my role. The big topic around here is protecting their supply chain. So the idea that, you know, you're impacted because China has an infection and they had to shut down factories, and now I have shortages in certain areas of my business. So there'll be a little bit of pullback. I don't think it's going to go all the way to a true nationalistic view of we have to have everything back in the country. But I think people are going to manage the risk by bringing more things back into the United States, or certainly at least in, you know, North America and Mexico. I think, and Canada. I think for me, flu season is never going to be the same. You know, they're starting, as they get more evidence around the after effects of having the coronavirus, the way it damages certain organs and systems that could be permanent. The idea you could have a terrible flu and after a couple of weeks you're back to normal. The idea that you could have coronavirus and you come out of it and you've got damaged kidneys. I mean, you know, so the idea of the flu being something that everybody just muscles through. If I get it, I get it. I'll fight through whatever. I don't typically get it. I'm not getting a shot. But now what they're saying is they think coronavirus is going to be back in time for flu season. And we're going to have this situation where it's going to be, well, did I catch the flu or did I catch the coronavirus? And so the idea of, okay, you know what, enjoy your summer, come September, and this goes to your point, Lily, about schools. Come September, that's the worst time to put people in a dorm room and a dining hall. And we're going to have to get through till February. Now, there'll be some targeted ways we don't have to shut down, but people we'll all have better masks. We'll all have better habits. I think it's going to be a long time, if ever, that we change back.
I do think that
kind of all over the place.
Masks are going to become a part of the fashion industry. I think it's going to be much more common to see them. And, you know, I was kind of used to seeing that in Asia, but it is jarring to walk around the United States and see so many people wearing masks, and also to not see people wearing them out of, you know, sheer self-absorbency. But to me, the mask has become kind of a sign of respect. I feel like, you know, even if I'm not sick, even if I'm not worried about getting too close to someone else, if I'm going to walk into someone's house or into someone's local business, I want to wear a mask because it's me telling them that I care about their safety. And that's what's thrown me off so much when I go to the grocery store and there are people roaming around together in groups just not wearing masks. It's like, I understand if you're not worried about yourself, but when you wear a mask, you're showing compassion for the people who have to stay in the store for the next 8 hours and breathe your air. And so I think masks will certainly become part of the fashion industry, part of an everyday apparel, especially as we get back into the winter months. But you know, there's that part of me that's kind of, I was taking a drive. I just needed to kind of clear my head the other day and ended up walking into this local coffee shop thinking, okay, I'm just going to put on my mask. I'm going to use Apple Pay. I'm going to get myself a coffee. And I ended up running into a coworker very unexpectedly as we were waiting for our coffee to be made. And I had a full conversation with her, and it was great to socialize 6 feet apart and just see another human that was a nice familiar face. And as I was walking out of the coffee shop, I realized that I had something like red or green or something stuck in my teeth, like right in the front. And I was like, oh crap, she probably saw that the entire time. And I went, oh wait, I was wearing a mask. She'll never know. Like there's that small part of me that's like, I'm not going to have to worry about any makeup. Like I'm good.
Well, actually, you know, I did see something where there's this whole thing about, okay, how can you make the most of a makeup and a makeover and makeup techniques if half your face is blocked? And again, we tend to use, this is definitely a PG or a G-rated podcast, but I have to just take this as a direct quote. and I don't know if it was I think it was on Facebook. Somebody forwarded something and said, the good thing about everyone wearing needing to wear masks is that you'll very easily be able to identify the selfish assholes because they're the ones that won't be wearing a mask. Right? So,
No, you're absolutely right. It's a sign that you have compassion for other people's well-being, and I think it's going to be a new societal behavior that I'm kind of intrigued to see how it plays out for the next couple of years.
Well, and I think it's going to be interesting. It's still crazy how differently the country, at the end of the day, we aren't one homogenous country, both in demographics, in density of population. Trump will say things like, oh, it's the blue states that are having the biggest problems. Well, it's because most of the largest metro areas that dominate certain states, Chicago, LA, New York, they happen to be such large cities that the idea of a societal need to consider the greater good is something that they've been dealing with for decades, because you can't not consider the greater good and build an effective public transportation system, build an effective hospital system. You have to consider all the demographics. Now, if you're in a community that's very well-to-do and it's not in New York City, there's still a survival of the fittest mentality, right? So I think, the whole idea of who's going to wear masks and who's not, there'll be an element of people that will actually maybe are resentful of wearing masks now, that once everything's lifted, the fact that they are no longer being told to wear masks, they may actually wear masks more willingly because they're viewing it as, okay, it's my personal choice. Maybe also considerate of my neighbor, but for whatever counterintuitive reason, there's a segment of the population that bristles at the idea of being told what to do. So I don't know what your reaction to that is.
You're right. People are feeling suppressed. Understandably so. It's especially if that's where your brain already kind of was that government is trying to control you, then this is only aiding that further. And it's but I think looking back on the protests particularly, and I don't want to spend too much time on them because we could probably do an entire episode about the protests that are going on, at least I know in our city here in Columbus, and the irony of protesters wearing masks and expressing that they have a concern about getting the disease, but that they are sick of being suppressed, and the irony of, okay, they're not suppressing you, they're inconveniencing you. And that was one of my favorite things I saw on Facebook yesterday, was someone pointing out the difference between suppression and inconveniencing. And I think it is going to be really interesting to see how people react differently, months from now when things do start to open up. Are they still going to keep wearing their masks because they still have a valid concern? Or are they still going to be kind of looking at the government going, you took away our rights, and now this is kind of our middle finger to you, is we're not going to wear our masks, and all of this was just a hoax. And I don't know. So it'll be really interesting to see where that crowd goes months from now. I don't know.
I don't want to get into it either as far as the protests go. But I will tell you, one of the statements I read early on, which definitely resonated, was, the thing about quarantining and social distancing is, if you do it right, it'll feel like an overreaction. If you don't do it right, a lot of people die. And so you're stuck between two very, very different extremes. And so the longer people hold on to social distancing and the governors hold their ground, the louder these voices are going to get to say that we overreacted. But I saw some graphs and some models where you got to remember, like New York City, they have some evidence that says there's 20% of the people in New York have the disease. So you have this community interspersed in New York that are infected. And what it showed was the curve, not in New York per se, because New York is definitely challenged, but in a lot of cities, the curve was well below. It was like a bump. And it was well below the capacity of the healthcare system. So this idea of we need to socially distance. But in some ways, though, flattening the curve doesn't mean shrinking the curve. And so the challenge is going to be that if you're going to fit 50,000 cases under the curve and they all come inside of a week, you're going to have a lot of people die. But if you take those 50,000 cases and you spread them over 3 months, you have to endure 3 months of those social distancing things, and it's going to seem like it's just interminable. But what the model that I just read today showed was, because I think it's because we have this foundation of people with the disease and are asymptomatic carriers, that if you were to lift restrictions today, it was amazing to me how quickly the model went, yeah, you're up here in a week. So then you look at stuff like Georgia and what they're doing, and you're going, well, they are going to be a test case, and it's going to be, you know, if all those shops open, people are going to start getting sick. How do you know the governor of Georgia was right or wrong? Just watch the hospitals around Atlanta, you know. But that's the thing about the new normal, which is there's going to be much more at stake at flu season. So we're going to go into, until we get vaccines, that we feel, and you know, we know are going to work, or going to significantly reduce the risk. I think it's going to be, you don't just, you know, all right, ready for flu season. It's okay. Everybody got their remote lesson plan. Everybody got their work from home plan. You know, the hourly workers that, you know, they get furloughed for a couple of months and they have to build that into their budget. And maybe that means that they get more than a minimum wage for the 8 months they're able to work full time. Right. You know, there's going to be some leveling out in a lot of different ways, but I don't know. It's not fun. I have my moments where I feel suppressed or oppressed. I know Lily gets, you know, Lily, you and your classmates are, I mean, we talked about it the other day. You're losing some stuff that you can't get back.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just happy I'm not a senior, because everyone knows about the seniors and losing graduation and all that, walking like their elementary schools. Some people do that. Like, it's just sad because they left for spring break, or like at least the schools here, we left for spring break expecting to come back, and then they just extend it, and now everything is shut down. So they have to do, they arranged a graduation in the summer, but I don't know if that's going to go through, because I think they're just being hopeful that everything will be fine by then. But I don't know. I think everything's probably going to extend into the next school year. So I just feel really bad for the seniors.
Well, I'll be curious to figure out how we might adapt to those trends. So if we know that there's going to be a certain period of the year that more people will want to stay socially isolated, I'm curious to see how those types of events might shift. You know, even like online concerts, conferences, I feel like a lot of people are going to be embracing this digital atmosphere a lot more. But I'm also curious to see what kinds of events are kind of pushed to the side in terms of importance or social hierarchy. Like I can't imagine going to an outdoor or indoor concert in the next year. I mean, I think that would be too overwhelming for me now that I've spent so much time socially isolated. And I think that's the other thing that will be an interesting reality to all of this, is that even if we are cleared to be okay in groups, in significant group numbers, I think mentally we're going to have a hurdle to go over, because I don't think we're going to be fully ready to just dive into a sea of people, at least not me. I mean, that might just be
well, and no, you're right. I mean, we've all been normalized back to having none of it, right? You can't even go out, and you can't even have your families come together and spend, you know, a Saturday afternoon at a family barbecue with 20 people, right? So now the idea of you level set what you appreciate more. And if you were to say to me, okay, this weekend you have a choice, you can do one of two things. You can go to a family barbecue and spend the afternoon with friends and family, or for $50, you can drive downtown and go to the American Airlines Center and watch some mid-level concert surrounded by 30,000 of your closest citizens, non-friend. And it's like, yeah, no, I'm not up for the concert. I'll go to the barbecue. Whereas for a number of years, your generation grew up with the idea of going, you know, the whole idea of a family barbecue, that was all we had. Like, what we would go to my grandparents, and it was, you'd go there and they'd barbecue, and every weekend it was, and there was some comfort in knowing, okay, the bowlers show up in the morning early to help with things. Then this family shows up around noon, and then some people leave around 2, but then other people show up at the end of the day, and it becomes this kind of all-day event. And you like the routine, and you like being able to see all those same faces, and there was comfort in that. We've lost that, right? At least for my family, that felt more, it started to feel more like obligation. And then everybody, the fact that you could go to a concert and you had the disposable cash, right? There's going to be a lot of people now, talk about appreciating the phrase saving for a rainy day, right? The people that went through the Depression, they saved their money. And they were stingy and they were cheap. Well, there's 22 million people that filed for unemployment. You can be guaranteed that those people are going to spend their money differently and save differently.
Well, and that was another thought that crossed my mind. And Lily, you might have some input on this too, is online shopping. Do we think that this will, because the big proponent of it is finances. People don't have the same amount of money that they used to spend. But on the other hand, you know, Josh, my boyfriend, is making more on unemployment right now than he was working a full-time job, which says a lot about our system and would be a totally other episode. But to him, he has a little bit of extra cushion with unemployment because of the extra federal funding that we've received. So is there more of an incline to do online shopping because you've got the boredom mixed with, in our case, a little bit of extra income? Now, for people who are used to higher salaries and weren't already being severely underpaid as he was, they might not be in the same position. But for us, we're in a position where we actually had a little bit more than what he had beforehand, and we're stuck at home. We might be interested in new crafts or hobbies or things. Where do we think online shopping is going to go?
I mean, I just think everyone, there's two sides to it. There's people that have just, I don't know, I've seen two parts of it. There's people that buy everything because they're bored and they can, and they're still getting money from their parents or from the unemployment or the $1,200, and they're just going crazy on online shopping. And then there's the people that are very conscious of the fact that there's people using delivery services for like essential workers, like masks and gloves and Lysol and all that stuff. And so you're either buying everything because you're bored, or you're not buying anything because you know that FedEx and UPS, they need to be used elsewhere. So I don't know. I don't know. There's two different sides.
Those are two points I hadn't entirely considered, Lily, especially, although I did actually comment on somebody's, there was a celebrity, and I don't know, I just felt the need to type it up, but you know, she showed what had come, and you know, this is my third delivery in 3 days from Amazon, and look what I got. And she showed some like little knick-knack BS kind of thing, and I just threw a comment, which she'll never read, but I threw a comment going, do you think maybe you could like dial down the unnecessary purchases so that the FedEx and UPS drivers that put their lives at risk are really, maybe most of what they're delivering is critical stuff. And, you know, whether that ever hit her eyes or not, the thought had crossed my mind. I know that we've ordered less. You know, there were some deliveries that were coming every day early on just out of habit, but then now, you know, you learn to get by with less. I know Lily's also talked about the idea of having a savings account actually feels kind of nice. And separate from the, you know, the Great Depression and the pinching pennies kind of thing, what you buy, what you need versus what you want, right? There's going to be a level setting there. But just the idea of having like the cushion of knowing, you know, people will say, you know what, you need to have 3 months worth of living expenses in a savings account. And they've been saying that for decades, but nobody's done it. Partly because it became so easy to spend money on all these external services. You know, why watch free TV when I can go to the movie theater? And the movie theater that used to cost $2 a movie now costs $13 to watch it in HD with surround sound. It's like, you know, so what's happening is you know, I don't even want to imagine what it's like to be a junior in high school and want to take Lily on a date, and you have to have at least $150 to just get through a first date in high school. If you don't want to take her to McDonald's and you know, take a walk around the park, right? If you want to go to dinner and a movie nowadays, you're spending over $100. As a high school kid, are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. So I think there's all sorts of things. It's all the calculus and all the priorities around needs and wants, all the risk profile of, well, there's some risks associated with going to a concert that aren't necessarily, no, you know what, I don't feel like taking that on. I get stressed when I go to the grocery store, so I'm just going to watch Netflix. You know, so I mean, I think there's so many things that are shifting, and they're still shifting. They're continuing to shift. For me, I know for me they do.
Well, and I think that's what's interesting about this is that I think we're all getting more in touch with what's really valuable to us and what's important to us, and you know, the people that we contact on a regular basis because we want to check in and make sure that they're okay. The things that we're ordering online, if we order anything, you know, if you're supporting a local business and they're doing carry out or delivery, you know, maybe you're tipping a little bit extra. Maybe you're showing appreciation for the fact that they are an essential worker. I saw a comment on Facebook, or it was someone reaching out to UPS about UPS customer service. She was upset because the delivery guy had made a snide comment about, or a snarky comment about delivering a pair of tennis shoes to her door and said, wow, you know, this isn't essential stuff. And her response was that, no, you know, I go walking every day because of my medical issues, and I needed a new pair of tennis shoes or else I was going to do damage to my body. And so there's this changing conversation about what's essential. And there's this need for a little bit more of a both flexibility, but also being able to inconvenience yourself a little bit for the well-being of others. Because like you said, Lily, you know, and Rich, you know, ordering knickknacks probably aren't essential right now. And you're putting an essential worker at risk because you couldn't wait to get this little thing for your desk. Whereas there also has to be an understanding from, you know, delivery drivers that some of those things that don't seem essential could really in fact be important to that person's survival. And so I think empathy is, I really hope, going to be built on all of this. But most importantly, I think we're all getting back to the roots of what's really important to us. And, you know, I personally feel like I've tried to start eating healthier and caring for my body. And not that I wasn't before, but I think I'm realizing now even more so as I'm stuck inside and sitting and just being stagnant, of how important movement and nourishment is to my everyday functioning. But, you know, there's those moments where you doubt if something is really what you need, and it's kind of hard to gauge that sometimes. But I think we're all doing a much better job of keeping each other in check of, you know, is this something that you really need, or is it just a want right now? And is it something that could wait until the world is in a little bit better of a place? But to some people, that's oppressing their desires. So,
well, but you know, it goes to something that's been being said for generations, right? All things in moderation, right? So if you go an entire month and you do nothing but deprive yourself of anything except critical needs, are you really feeding your soul the way you need to do that? And is this, one order from Amazon of something that you really want, and it's a small thing, but it would really make you feel good to get it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think you have to get to a point where, Amazon and UPS were never meant to replace our national supply chain. The fact that our government can't get things to hospitals, and the fact that there aren't, at this point, pickup centers for people to go get their free masks, right? I mean, we're not a socialist country, but the fact that our federal government has done nothing relative to what's been going on, our federal government has done nothing. So as a result, Amazon, UPS, and all those have filled the gap, and they've become the delivery mechanism for these critical things. Well, you know what? That's not what they're in business for, and we shouldn't expect that that's all they'll be delivering going forward. But I think right now everyone's a little raw. I think everybody is coming off of probably what's been their most frustrating. If they've had a frustrating interaction recently, then they project that frustration onto that next thing. So it's like you run into somebody who's rude and inconsiderate, and whether it's through scrolling through your social media feed or actually seeing somebody at the grocery store, well, then your next assumption when you look at somebody is to assess their intentions or their position based on that last interaction. So there's a lot of raw emotion bouncing back and forth that people are, if I had a really great interaction, I could get sideswiped by someone who's rude. If I had a really rude interaction, I could miss an opportunity to have a really pleasant interaction with someone else, right? So I think we all just have to find that new equilibrium. I won't call it a new normal because I don't think we're ever going to see anything that we would consider to be normal. I would just say that right now there's a lot of disequilibrium and a lot of feeling of being out of balance in every aspect of everybody's lives. And we need that equilibrium to settle in.
Well, I think wherever we are in the next 2 years, 10 years, it'll certainly be a world that we don't recognize from a year ago or even 4 months ago. I think a lot of things are going to change and shift, and some for the better, some for the worst, I'm sure. But as is with anything that modernizes and progresses, it'll be an adventure, that's for sure. Do you guys have any closing thoughts?
Really?
I don't know. I just think people are going to be more considerate of other people, hopefully. I don't know if that's true, but
Fingers crossed.
I think they will, and I think the reason that you're on the right track there, Lily, is because people will be more considerate of others because they'll be more conscious or thankful for what they have. And if you come from a place of being thankful and grateful, you tend to treat people better. As we've seen, if you tend to lose things and you feel like you've been betrayed or you feel like you've been unfairly hurt, you can lash out. So I hope the majority of the people are going to come out of this feeling like, okay, you know what, I'm blessed in all the right ways, and so now I will act accordingly. So I hope you're right.
I hope you're right too. That would be a better world to live in, that's for sure. Well, this has been another XYZ Storytellers episode. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for checking out our little time capsule here. And we look forward to producing some episodes, not in quarantine, hopefully in the future, in the near future, but not too near.
Well, one we'll do, which we definitely will do, is we'll have to have a celebration one where we're all in the same room.
Yes, absolutely. It looks like I'm going to Texas, y'all.